The intergalactic combat vault stood as a monument to controlled violence. Its crystalline walls stretching across 3 kilometers of reinforced quantum steel plating that could theoretically withstand the simultaneous detonation of 17 stellar cores. Not that anyone had tested this particular specification, mind you, but the insurance premiums were astronomical nonetheless. This facility represented the pinnacle of military assessment technology, where civilizations from across the galaxy sent their finest warriors to prove their species' combat worthiness through a delightfully straightforward process. Survive an encounter with a genetically engineered apex predator that had been specifically designed to kill everything it met. The concept was elegantly simple, really. Take the most dangerous traits from 1,000 different species, splice them together using techniques that would make ethicists weep into their morning stimulants, and then release the resulting monstrosity into a controlled environment with whatever poor soul had volunteered to prove their martial prowess. The survival rate hovered around 27%, which the facility's marketing department cheerfully described as challenging but achievable, while their legal department quietly maintained a small fleet of grief counselors on permanent standby. What made the combat vault particularly prestigious was its complete impartiality. Every species that had achieved interstellar travel was welcome to submit candidates, provided they could afford the assessment fees and had adequate insurance coverage for potential biological cleanup costs. The facility's administrators took great pride in their egalitarian approach to scheduled violence, operating under the enlightened principle that any sentient being deserved the opportunity to be horrifically mauled by a scientifically perfected killing machine, regardless of their species' technological advancement or cultural sophistication. The current assessment cycle had attracted an impressive array of candidates, each representing what their respective civilizations considered the absolute pinnacle of martial excellence. The facility's intake protocols had processed warriors whose very presence caused the atmospheric sensors to register elevated stress pheromones among the administrative staff. Leading the group was a representative from the Krathan hegemony, a species that had spent the last 3 millennia perfecting the art of biological warfare through systematic self-modification. Standing nearly 4 meters tall with arms that could crush titanium and a nervous system that had been rewired to eliminate the inconvenience of fear, the Krathan warrior possessed enough combat enhancements to serve as a walking weapons platform. Their culture viewed pain as a suggestion rather than an imperative, which had proven remarkably effective in their expansion across 17 star systems. Equally impressive was the Vexay champion, whose species had achieved immortality through the simple expedient of downloading their consciousness into combat-optimized synthetic bodies. This particular specimen had been crafted from materials that existed only in the cores of collapsed stars, equipped with reflexes that operated at quantum speeds and weapon systems that could reconfigure themselves based on tactical requirements. The Vexay had submitted detailed performance specifications that read like a dissertation on applied destruction. The Zephyrian delegate brought a different approach entirely, representing a species that had evolved beyond physical form into pure energy being. They had constructed a temporary corporeal vessel specifically for this assessment, incorporating gravitational manipulation capabilities and the ability to phase through solid matter at will. Their tactical philosophy centered on the principle that the most effective combat technique was simply ceasing to exist in the same dimensional space as one's opponent. Into this gathering of galactic super soldiers walked a human female who appeared to have been selected through some sort of cosmic, possessed the standard configuration of limbs that her species had maintained for millennia without significant modification, and carried herself with the sort of casual confidence that suggested she either didn't understand the situation or had achieved a level of Zen-like acceptance regarding her imminent demise. The intake sensors struggled to catalog her specifications. No cybernetic enhancement, no genetic modifications beyond the baseline human template, no exotic materials incorporated into her skeletal structure. Her reflexes tested within normal parameters for her species, which placed them somewhere between adequately functional and charmingly optimistic. The medical scanners detected standard human physiology with all the impressive durability of wet tissue paper when compared to the combat-optimized specimens surrounding her. What made her presence particularly bewildering was the complete absence of any technological augmentation. While her fellow candidates had arrived with enough military hardware to destabilize small solar systems, the human had submitted a requisition list that included items like sturdy boots and basic field knife. The facility's quartermaster had initially assumed this was some sort of elaborate practical joke, possibly involving a holographic projection designed to test the psychological readiness of the actual candidate. The other warriors regarded her with the sort of bemused curiosity typically reserved for exotic zoo specimens. Here was a being that had somehow achieved interstellar travel despite possessing all the combat capability of a particularly determined houseplant. The Administrative Review Board convened an emergency session to address what they diplomatically termed the human situation. Chief Administrator Vorthak, whose species had evolved from apex predators that hunted in pack formations across frozen methane plains, struggled to comprehend how such a obviously inadequate specimen had passed their screening protocol. Perhaps, suggested the intake coordinator, we should classify this as a clerical error and quietly redirect the human to the tourism section. The facility's legal counsel, a being whose own species had achieved sentience through aggressive litigation, pointed out that rejecting a candidate based on apparent inadequacy would violate 17 different interstellar discrimination treaties. The insurance adjuster noted that allowing such an obviously doomed participant to proceed would likely result in cleanup costs that exceeded the facility's quarterly budget. After considerable debate, they reached a compromise. The human would be permitted to participate, but her assessment would be scheduled last, ensuring that the serious candidates could demonstrate their capabilities without the distraction of witnessing what everyone assumed would be a very brief and somewhat embarrassing spectacle. The pre-combat evaluation chamber hummed with the sort of technological sophistication that made quantum physicists weep with envy. Each candidate underwent detailed analysis while their fellow warriors observed with the professional interest of apex predators sizing up potential competition. The results painted a portrait of evolutionary excellence that would have impressed Darwin himself, assuming he hadn't immediately fled screaming into the nearest temporal anomaly. The Krathan representatives had demonstrated their species' approach to combat optimization by casually lifting a 3-ton calibration weight with one hand, while simultaneously calculating artillery trajectories in their head. Their muscular system had been enhanced with synthetic fibers that could contract with enough force to crush diamond, while their skeletal structure incorporated materials harvested from the cores of neutron stars. Most impressively, their pain receptors had been surgically rewired to convert physical damage into tactical analysis, transforming agony into strategic advantage. The evaluation computers struggled to find an upper limit to their physical capabilities, eventually settling on measurements that required entirely new units of measurement. The Vex-High Champions assessment required specialized equipment designed to analyze beings that existed primarily as organized energy patterns. Their synthetic body could reconfigure itself in real time, shifting between combat modes with the fluidity of liquid mercury. Weapons systems materialized from their molecular structure on command, while their consciousness operated across multiple processing threads simultaneously. The remarkable thing about Vex-High technology was its complete integration with their mental faculties. They didn't simply use tools, they became tools, transforming their entire existence into a weapon of mathematically precise lethality. The Zephyrian delegates' evaluation proved particularly challenging, since they existed in a state of controlled energy coherence that made traditional measurements somewhat irrelevant. Their temporary physical manifestation could alter its density from gossamer light to neutronium heavy within nanoseconds, while their consciousness operated across dimensional boundaries that normal physics politely pretended didn't exist. They demonstrated their combat philosophy by simply ceasing to exist in the same spatial coordinates as a target drone, causing it to collapse into a quantum probability cloud that the facility's janitor would later describe as deeply unsettling to mop up. Additional candidates included a collective intelligence from the swarm worlds that had downloaded itself into a single optimized combat chassis, a crystalline being whose thought processes operated at light-speed frequency, and a representative from a species that had achieved immortality through the ingenious method of existing in 17 different temporal states simultaneously. Each warrior brought their own unique approach to the fundamental problem of applied violence, creating a showcase of evolutionary creativity that would have made natural selection itself take detailed note. The Combat Vault's technical specifications read like a love letter written by engineers who had spent entirely too much time contemplating the mathematics of controlled mayhem. The arena itself spanned 5 square kilometers of adaptive terrain that could shift between environments ranging from Arctic tundra to molten lava fields, all while maintaining atmospheric conditions suitable for carbon-based lifeforms and their more exotic alternative. The facility's crown jewel was its apex predator, a creature that represented 3 centuries of genetic engineering by scientists, who had apparently decided that natural selection moved too slowly for their taste. Designated as classification Omega-7, this biological masterpiece incorporated the most lethal characteristics from over 2,000 different species, creating something that existed solely to demonstrate why evolution had spent billions of years developing the concept of fear. Its sensory systems could detect electromagnetic signatures across 17 different spectrums, while its muscular structure generated enough kinetic energy to punch through reinforced hull plating. The creature's intelligence had been calibrated to operate at the precise level required for optimal hunting efficiency, smart enough to adapt tactics in real time, but not so intelligent as to develop inconvenient concepts like mercy or hesitation. Its genetic template included regenerative capabilities that could rebuild damaged tissue faster than most weapons could inflict it, along with a digestive system capable of extracting nutrients from literally any organic matter it encountered. Historical data indicated that 73% of participants failed to survive their initial encounter with the apex predator, though the facility's marketing department preferred to emphasize that 27% achieved what they cheerfully described as satisfactory performance outcome. The average survival time for unsuccessful candidates was approximately 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Though this statistic included several unfortunate incidents where the predator had taken its time for educational purposes. While her fellow candidates engaged in elaborate pre-combat rituals that involved everything from mechanical system diagnostics to quantum meditation techniques, the human approached her preparation with the sort of methodical simplicity that suggested either profound wisdom or complete detachment from reality. She requested access to the facility's basic equipment catalog, ignoring the advanced technological marvels in favor of items that wouldn't have seemed out of place in a medieval armory. Her equipment selection raised eyebrows among the administrative staff. Standard issue combat boots, reinforced but not enhanced. A basic field knife with a carbon steel blade that belonged in a museum rather than a high-tech combat facility. A simple utility belt containing what appeared to be camping supplies rather than military hardware. The quartermaster double-checked the requisition forms, certain that translation errors had somehow converted requests for plasma weaponry into camping gear. The human spent her preparation time examining the arena schematics with the focused attention of someone studying a particularly challenging puzzle. She tested the weight and balance of her equipment with practiced movements, stretching and warming up her muscles in a routine that suggested extensive combat training, despite her apparent lack of enhancement. Her breathing remained steady, her pulse rate stable, displaying the sort of calm professionalism that made the facility's medical staff wonder if their sensors were malfunctioning. Most remarkably, she showed no signs of the pre-combat stress responses that typically affected even the most experienced warriors. No elevated adrenaline, no tactical anxiety, no existential dread regarding her impending encounter with a creature designed to kill everything it met. The facility's staff had organized an informal wagering system that operated through encrypted channels designed to avoid the attention of their supervisors and various interstellar gambling regulation agencies. The betting pools reflected a unanimous consensus regarding the human's prospects, with odds calculated using algorithms that treated her survival as a statistical impossibility rather than a mere improbability. The most popular wager involved predicting her exact survival time, with estimates ranging from 12 seconds to a generous 43 seconds. The facility's head of security had placed money on 15 seconds, citing the apex predator's tendency to toy with obviously inadequate prey. The medical staff had pooled their resources to bet on under 10 seconds, demonstrating the sort of professional pessimism that came from extensive experience with combat-related casualties. A small group of maintenance workers had established a side bet regarding the cleanup requirements, with detailed speculation about the distribution patterns of organic matter following the encounter. The combat vault's activation sequence began with the sort of theatrical flourish that suggested the facility's designers had enjoyed entirely too many dramatic entertainment programs. Warning klaxons echoed through corridors while holographic displays provided real-time updates on environmental controls, atmospheric composition, and structural integrity measurements that would have impressed a starship engineering crew. The arena's adaptive terrain systems hummed to life, generating a landscape that resembled a primordial world where evolution had been particularly creative in developing new and interesting ways for things to kill each other. Observation decks filled with facility personnel, military attachés from various civilizations, and insurance adjusters who had arrived to document the proceedings for actuarial purposes. The viewing chambers were equipped with advanced shielding systems designed to protect observers from any stray energy discharges, projectiles, or existential crises that might result from witnessing the systematic dismantling of galactic military elite. At the center of this technological marvel, a containment field flickered and died, releasing classification Omega-7 into an environment specifically designed to showcase its remarkable talents for creative destruction. The first wave of candidates entered the arena with the confident swagger of beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history occupying the apex of their respective food chains. Their tactical approach demonstrated the sort of coordinated professionalism that had enabled their species to achieve interstellar dominance through the simple expedient of being better at violence than everyone else they encountered. The Krathan warrior led the initial assault, their enhanced physiology allowing them to close distance with the apex predator at velocities that created sonic booms. Their combat philosophy centered on the principle that most tactical problems could be solved through the application of overwhelming kinetic force, a strategy that had proven remarkably effective across 17 different star systems. The collision between Krathan warrior and apex predator generated enough energy to trigger the arena's emergency dampening fields, creating a shockwave that rattled observation windows 3 kilometers away. The Vexay champion coordinated their attack with mathematical precision, their synthetic consciousness calculating optimal strike patterns while their body reconfigured into specialized weapon configuration. They approached the engagement as a complex engineering problem, requiring the systematic application of advanced materials science and quantum mechanics. Their weapon systems materialized from their molecular structure in real time, creating an arsenal that would have impressed arms manufacturers across the galaxy. The Zephyrian delegate employed their unique dimensional manipulation abilities, phasing in and out of normal space-time while attempting to disrupt the Predator's molecular cohesion through controlled quantum interference. Their strategy involved avoiding direct physical confrontation entirely, instead focusing on manipulating the fundamental forces that held their opponent together at the subatomic level. Additional candidates contributed their own specialized approaches. The collective intelligence from the swarm worlds attempted to overwhelm the Predator through coordinated multi-vector attacks, while the crystalline being operated at thought speeds that made their movements appear as barely visible blurs. The temporally distributed immortal attacked from 17 different time streams simultaneously, creating a complex pattern of causality loops that made the facility's physicists reach for their emergency headache medication. For approximately 3 minutes and 47 seconds, the arena contained what could generously be described as a battle between the galaxy's finest warriors and a creature designed to represent the absolute pinnacle of biological warfare. The apex predator's response to this coordinated assault demonstrated why 3 centuries of genetic engineering had produced something that existed beyond the normal parameters of evolutionary possibility. Its sensory systems tracked all 17 simultaneous attacks, while its enhanced neural pathways calculated optimal response patterns with the sort of computational efficiency that would have impressed quantum supercomputers. The creature's first kill came when it demonstrated that the Krathan warrior's enhanced skeletal structure, while impressive by galactic standards, was still fundamentally constructed from matter that could be restructured through the application of sufficient force. The Predator's claws, composed of materials that existed only in the cores of collapsed stars, carved through neutron star-enhanced bone with the casual efficiency of a knife through warm butter. The Vexay champion's synthetic body provided slightly more resistance, requiring the Predator to employ its secondary weapon system. These included acid production capabilities that could dissolve quantum-hardened materials, electromagnetic pulse generation that disrupted advanced circuitry, and the ability to phase shift its own molecular structure to match its opponent's defensive configuration. The champion's consciousness attempted to download itself into backup systems, only to discover that the Predator had evolved countermeasures specifically designed to track and eliminate distributed intelligence patterns. The Zephyrian delegate's dimensional manipulation abilities proved insufficient when confronted with a creature that had been genetically programmed to hunt across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. The Predator's enhanced perception systems could track quantum signatures across 17 different dimensional frequencies, while its neural pathways had been modified to process information from temporal states that didn't technically exist yet. One by one, the galaxy's finest warriors discovered that their species' evolutionary advantages were simply insufficient when measured against a creature that had been specifically designed to hunt beings exactly like them. The arena's cleanup systems activated automatically, preparing to process organic matter according to various interstellar health and safety regulations. The observation decks fell silent as the human entered the arena, her footsteps echoing across terrain that had been systematically cleared of what had once been the galaxy's most formidable warrior. The facility's personnel watched through reinforced viewing ports, with the sort of morbid fascination typically reserved for natural disasters or particularly elaborate traffic accidents. She moved with the steady, unhurried pace of someone taking a casual stroll through a park rather than entering a combat zone that had just witnessed the systematic dismantling of superhuman killing machines. Her equipment remained exactly as she had requested. Basic boots, simple knife, utility belt containing camping supplies that wouldn't have impressed a wilderness survival instructor. The apex predator regarded her with the sort of casual interest that suggested it was already calculating the most efficient method of dispatch. Its sensory systems registered her biological signatures, noting the absence of any technological enhancements or genetic modifications that might require specialized countermeasures. The creature's neural pathways processed this information with the clinical efficiency of a computer running through a simple diagnostic routine. Classification Omega-7 had been designed to hunt the galaxy's apex predator. What approached it now was something that barely registered as a threat according to its enhanced threat assessment protocol. The predator's programming suggested this encounter would require approximately 6 seconds to resolve, allowing adequate time for the creature to demonstrate its capabilities before being returned to containment for its next scheduled exhibition. The human stopped walking and stood perfectly still, her breathing steady and her pulse rate maintaining the same calm rhythm she had displayed during preparation. The apex predator approached the human with the sort of leisurely confidence that came from 3 centuries of genetic optimization and a perfect combat record against galactic military elite. Its enhanced sensory systems had already cataloged her biological specifications, noting the absence of any modifications that would require specialized hunting protocols. The creature's neural pathways processed this information with the clinical efficiency of a supercomputer running through a routine diagnostic, concluding that standard termination procedures would be more than adequate. Classification Omega-7 had been engineered to hunt beings that could manipulate quantum mechanics, phase through dimensional barriers, and regenerate from molecular disruption. What stood before it now was a baseline biological entity that appeared to have been constructed from the sort of materials that evolution had abandoned as insufficiently durable several million years ago. The predator's threat assessment algorithm struggled to assign meaningful danger ratings to someone whose most impressive physical capability appeared to be the ability to maintain bipedal locomotion without falling over. The creature's approach was unhurried, almost casual, as if it was already calculating the optimal angle of attack to ensure the most efficient termination. Its claws extended with the sort of mechanical precision that suggested the encounter would be concluded within the next 6 seconds, allowing adequate time for the facility's cleanup systems to process the organic matter according to standard protocols. The human remained perfectly still, her breathing steady and her pulse rate maintaining the same calm rhythm that had puzzled the facility's medical staff during her preparation phase. What happened next would require the facility's physicists to completely recalibrate their understanding of combat effectiveness, and possibly question several fundamental assumptions about the nature of tactical thinking. The human did something that none of the galaxy's military strategists had considered, something so fundamentally simple that it had escaped the attention of civilizations that had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. She threw down, not metaphorically, not as part of some elaborate tactical maneuver involving advanced physics and quantum mechanics. She literally reached down, grabbed a handful of ordinary arena soil, and flung it directly into the apex predator's enhanced sensory organs with the sort of casual precision that suggested she had been practicing this particular technique for quite some time. The effect was immediate and devastating. Classification Omega-7's sensory systems, designed to track targets across 17 different dimensional frequencies and process information from temporal states that didn't technically exist yet, suddenly found themselves attempting to filter out billions of microscopic particles that had been specifically calibrated to interfere with electromagnetic spectrum analysis. The creature's enhanced neural pathways, capable of calculating optimal response patterns faster than quantum computers, experienced what could only be described as the biological equivalent of a system crash. While the apex predator thrashed blindly, attempting to clear its sensory organs using protocols that had never been designed to handle something as primitively effective as thrown soil, the human moved with the fluid efficiency of someone who had spent considerable time thinking about the practical applications of violence. Her approach was not enhanced by exotic technologies or evolutionary modification, but by something far more dangerous: experience with environments where survival depended on using whatever resources were immediately available rather than relying on sophisticated equipment that might not function when needed. The Predator's programming had prepared it for quantum warfare, dimensional manipulation, and temporal paradoxes. It had not been designed to handle the tactical implications of getting dirt in its eye. The 9-second sequence that followed would be studied by military academies across the galaxy for generations, though most of their tactical analysis would focus on the wrong elements entirely. While the apex predator attempted to recalibrate its compromised sensory systems, the human employed what could generously be described as aggressive problem-solving techniques that would have impressed a medieval warrior more than a modern military strategist. Second 1 through 3 involved the human closing distance while the predator was effectively blind, moving with the sort of economical efficiency that suggested extensive training in environments where wasted motion meant death. Her basic field knife, constructed from materials that belonged in a museum rather than a high-tech combat facility, found the precise location where the creature's enhanced neural pathways connected to its primary sensory processing centers. Seconds 4 through 6 demonstrated the human's understanding of biological systems that had been optimized for combat effectiveness rather than redundant. While the predator's genetic modifications provided remarkable resistance to conventional weapons, they had not been designed to handle the systematic disruption of critical neural pathways by someone who understood exactly which connections to sever. Her knife work displayed the sort of clinical precision that suggested intimate familiarity with anatomy across multiple species. The final 3 seconds involved what the facility's medical staff would later describe as comprehensive systems failure in their incident report. The apex predator, engineered to hunt the galaxy's most dangerous beings, discovered that its enhanced physiology was remarkably vulnerable to someone who treated violence as a technical problem, requiring practical solutions, rather than a dramatic demonstration of superior evolutionary development. Classification Omega-7 collapsed with the sort of finality that suggested its 3 centuries of genetic optimization had been insufficient preparation for encountering someone who approached combat with the casual professionalism of a maintenance technician fixing a malfunctioning piece of equipment. The observation decks remained silent for approximately 17 seconds, which the facility's administrative staff would later identify as the longest period of complete quiet in the combat vault's operational history. Personnel who had witnessed the systematic dismantling of galactic military elite found themselves struggling to process what they had just observed, their understanding of tactical effectiveness requiring immediate and comprehensive revision. The human cleaned her knife on a piece of cloth from her utility belt, resheathed it with the same methodical precision she had displayed throughout her preparation, and walked toward the arena exit with the unhurried pace of someone who had just completed a routine maintenance task. Her pulse rate remained steady, her breathing normal, displaying none of the physiological stress responses that typically accompanied successful combat encounters. The facility's insurance adjusters began frantically recalculating their risk assessment protocols, while the medical staff prepared incident reports that would require entirely new classification categories. The betting pools had been rendered obsolete by an outcome that none of the facility's personnel had considered mathematically possible. Chief Administrator Vorthok found himself confronting the uncomfortable realization that the galaxy's most primitive species had just demonstrated a level of tactical effectiveness that rendered 3 centuries of genetic engineering and technological advancement essentially irrelevant. The human had solved an impossible problem through the simple expedient of ignoring the rules that everyone else had assumed were fundamental to combat effectiveness. As the arena's cleanup systems activated to process the remains of Classification Omega-7, the facility's staff began to suspect that their understanding of military capability might require significant revision. The species they had dismissed as inadequate had just proven that sophistication was not always superior to simplicity, and that the most effective weapon was often the one that nobody expected to work.